So we've all been encouraged to spend time alone with God in prayer. And I don't know about you, but for me, sometimes that's easier said than done. Like I would go to pray and suddenly everything that I haven't done yet pops to the top of my mind. I didn't take out the trash on today's trash day. I told that person I would send them this thing and I never sent it to him. I, haven't checked in on my grandmother in 3 years. And suddenly it's like the only thing I can think about. Or the other thing that sometimes happens to me when I pray is that I will, say, I'm going to spend these 20 minutes in prayer with God. And then, suddenly a minute and a half into it, I'm like, is my watch broken? Surely it's been more than a minute and a half. I mean, it's got to have been at least 15 minutes now. And the time just seems to drag on. I'm sure that doesn't happen to you. You seem much holier than me. But for me, that has been my experience in prayer sometimes. I am Elizabeth. I am the Global Engagement Pastor at CCOF. And for me, the way that started to shift was I burned out massively in India. I lived there for several years, and I just got to this place where I needed more than just the discipline of prayer. I needed to find life in prayer. And if you look at the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, these stories of Jesus, you'll see that Jesus did not just have a discipline of prayer. He found life in it. In fact, I'm going to read you, this is from Luke chapter 5, verse 15 and 16. It says this, "Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." So he's like rocking this, savior of the world thing, and people are coming from all over to hear what he teaches, and they're asking him to heal the sick, and it's like healing, healing, healing. But what he does whenever he can, you see it not just in this verse, but across the Gospels. If you read these accounts of Jesus, you see him doing this all the time. He goes off to a lonely place and he prays. That's not discipline. That's him seeking something life-giving when the needs of others are so overwhelming to him. When this becomes too huge for him to manage on his own, he goes to a lonely place and prays. And I think one of the best things that we can do to find this life in prayer, like Jesus did, is to push through the hard and find the good. And to not say, well, I did it once and it was hard, or I did it once and that felt pretty okay, but to commit ourselves, I'm going to pray for this amount of time, this amount of days. Even when it's hard, I'm going to push through. The good news is you don't have to just do that by persevering, but attached to this video is a guide for how to spend an hour in prayer, and that's actually what we're going to ask you to do with your Trinity groups today. We're going to ask you to spend an hour in prayer together. The good news is if you look at the guide, it's actually really easy. It's broken up into 5-minute chunks, and I don't know if you know this yet, but you can do anything for 5 minutes. And you can do 12 things for 5 minutes at a time and spend an hour in prayer. It's super cool. And I think what you'll find is as you do this together, as you persevere together for an hour in prayer, you're going to come at the end of it and say, that was easier than I thought, that was more fun than I thought, and that was actually really cool for my spiritual life, what we just did together. And if you do that regularly, I'm going to challenge you to not necessarily spend an hour in prayer with your Trinity group all the time, but to take one of those 5-minute chunks and do it on your own. Or every time you meet with your Trinity group, take a couple of those 5-minute chunks and just spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes in prayer together. And what you're going to find is it's like working out. It's building your prayer muscles. And if you can break it up into these little, exercises, then pretty soon, suddenly an hour in prayer feels easy. And not just easy, but life-giving, to the point where you are like, oh my gosh, I just start praying, and then suddenly, whatever, the Spirit of God descends like a dove. Probably not going to happen, but you never know. But what I do know is that the longer that we spend committed to prayer, like Jesus was, the more life we find in it, and the more joy we find in it. And so today with your Trinity groups, try this hour, see how it goes. Find some way to post on social media how you did or what you did or how it felt. We'd love to hear about your experience of an hour in prayer and see what persevering in prayer will do for you and for your Trinity group and for your spiritual life in general.